Good afternoon, members and members of the public. I'd like to welcome you to the November 21st Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. Sorry for a slight delay. The executive slightly overran and we just gave everyone a slightly nice comfort break as opposed to going straight into the next meeting. We are live webcast today, so can I please remind members to use their microphones and remember to turn them off when not speaking. Now onto the agenda. Agenda item number 1, apologies. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Hawkins, De Winter, Penfold and Lawford. Councillor Winter is joining on MS Teams. Councillor Bonham is substituting for Councillor Lawford and Councillor Taylor is subbing for Councillor Hawkins. Thank you.
I'm going to need a vice chair for today's meeting. So is there any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Eadie.
Thank you very much. Have I got a seconder?
Chairman, I will second that. Thank you.
All those in favour? Item number 2, the minutes. Committee to consider whether the minutes of the committee held on the 17th of October 2024 are a true and correct record. Do we all agree? Proposed? Seconded? Yep. Okay. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? That's no declarations. Item number 4, there's no items of urgent business. Item number 5, there is no reason to divide the agenda. Item number 6, public forum. There's been no questions from the public submitted. Now on to item number 7, South Hams Citizens Advice Key Partner Update. I believe we have Jamie Moore here, and also, don't have your name, sorry.
My name's Chris Peach. I'm the chair of the trustees. I'm the chair of the South Hams Citizens Advice. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I believe you're going to give us a small presentation. Nikki?
Yeah, Chairman, I just wanted to introduce them. It's my portfolio area. So I've nicked it back off Dan Thomas, who nicked it back off me, because I am a massive advocate of South Hams CA. We have a superb organisation located at Follerton House. I think we're very, very lucky to have them. And I look forward to the presentation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to let them do their presentation, and can we keep any questions to afterwards? Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you today. It's a real pleasure to meet some of you and some people that I know from before. So thank you, Nikki, for that lovely introduction. So my name's Janie Moore. I'm the Chief Officer for Citizens Advice South Hams. And if you don't mind skipping to the next slide, what I wanted to talk to you about today is I'm just going to do a little bit of background on who Citizens Advice are and how we operate. Then we're going to talk about the cost of living and the impact it's had on our local clients. We're going to look at how the local service is delivered and the impact that has on local people, our funding model and our priorities for the next 3 years. Thank you. So, Citizens Advice. I think many people in this room will know us. We are a household name. We've got 85 years worth of history that we just celebrated this autumn. So there's some kind of expectations of what we do and how we work. I think what isn't known very often is that each Citizens Advice is an independent local charity. So Chris here is our chair. I report into a board of trustees, and that is mapped across the country. So each Citizens Advice across England and Wales is its own charity, meeting its own objects, its charitable objects, and generating its own funding. What we have is a really quite fascinating membership model where each charity then pays into the national system and says, okay, our objects are the prevention and relief of poverty. We'd like to do that through the provision of information and advice. And we want to be part of the National Citizens Advice Scheme. So in return for paying our membership fee, we get access to the name and to the branding. We're able to use a centralised client database, and we are able to quality assure the advice that we give. So what that means is that we are annually audited against this AQS, the Advice Quality Standard, and it means that you can be sure that the advice we are giving is moving clients forward and helping them resolve the issues that they face. In terms of our shared database, it gives us a unique selling point that is different to many different organisations across England and Wales. So if you think of the NHS, quite often there's two databases, even within one hospital. There might be, even two departments working closely together. But our database is entirely singular. So every single client who comes to Citizens Advice is recorded in the same system. That means that we can see their journey over time. We can look at what the advice needs are, trends over time, and we can also look at groups of people and how policy and practice is affecting or proportionally disaffecting people. So it gives us a really unique selling point. And I think one of the things that we do really well on a national scale is influence national government. So if you remember when universal credit was implemented, there was a 6-week wait at that stage. So somebody applying for benefits had to find money from somewhere for 6 weeks before they received their initial payment. We were able to see the impact that was having on a national scale. We lobbied. It's now a 5-week wait. You could question how effective the lobbying was, but it has made a difference, and there's a grant or there's a loan available for people at the start of their claim. So working together as a national organisation gives us a really powerful position to be in. And what I wanted to talk about in terms of the cost of living is we've got roughly, if you go on to the next one, please. We've got roughly 2,000 advice issue codes. So when a client walks through our doors and we give them some help, we record it against one of those 2,000 issues. And when the cost of living started to become a real issue, our colleagues at National selected 5 of those and said, okay, let's take these as KPIs, as key performance indicators. How are they impacting? How is the cost of living impacting people against these 5 advice issue codes? And that's the graph that you can see up there now. So you've got a pre-COVID period where it's relatively flat. And then you can see that as COVID hit, the demand on our service dropped away significantly. So partly that's because people were in lockdown, but also partly there was a lot of additional support, financial support available for people at that time. And as we came out of COVID, the cost of living crisis came along. And then since then, it's basically just exponential growth with a peak there. That highest point on the graph is January 2024. So you might think the dip after that looks promising, but if you go back 12 months and 12 months, it's been the January every year where we've had the peak. So we're fully expecting a bigger peak this year, this January, than we've seen in the past. And on the next slides, we've got the picture for Devon. So it's actually very similar. I think as you get smaller data set, the trends get slightly less reliable, but that's why I've stuck to using the Devon data here. So again, you can see that high point was January 24. It has dipped away, but we are fully gearing up for expectations for this January. So I thought then we'd look at some of the trends, yes please, in a little bit more detail. I've got 4 graphs for you now, which just show, this is the Devon data again, how the numbers are changing over time. So it is a bit spiky because, like I said, it's a smaller selection of data, but basically the trends there around homelessness, it's up. Trends around housing issues, they're up. And we are seeing there, that's council tax arrears is actually one of our biggest areas of support where we have to help people with. And at the bottom there, we've got smaller numbers around rent arrears, but actually, again, all of those trends are moving upwards. So there's some real concern here. And a lot of this is driven by the S21 no-fault evictions, I'm sure you'll be aware of. If we move on to the next slide, it's a very similar story with debt. We've got fuel debts here and credit card debts, both trending upwards. And this is because people very often aren't able to pay their utility bills. They're having to resort to credit to cover the household costs and keep warm and feed their children. Really quite challenging circumstances that we are supporting people with. And the impact of all of these issues, really sadly, is being seen in relationships. So that is going up as well. So that's the number of people coming to us for support with understanding divorce or separation and the impact that's going to have on their children. So we've then looked at the data more specifically for South Hams, and I know there's a lot of data on here, but it's just a couple of simple points I wanted to make. From 2019 through to the end of, or 22-23, all of those coloured lines are fairly well grouped together, and that shows the number of clients that we helped every year in our office. And then you can see last year, 23-24, that green line just shoots out, and you can see the growth, and that's been surpassed even further by the yellow line, which is halfway through this year, which shows the number of people we're helping each month this year. So what's driving those trends? So this, I wasn't quite sure how to explain it. I've taken 6 months worth of data and then said, compared to last year, are we at the 50% mark, the same as last year, or above that or below it? So for all those issues listed, we're seeing more clients in this area than we were last year. So the biggest one being relationships and family, up 70%. We've got charitable support and food banks up at 60%, housing just slightly less at 57%, and debt at 53%. So there's some very sobering trends here, and what we think we're seeing is more and more people coming with more and more complex issues. So what are we doing about all of this? We have had a partnership with the University of Plymouth for the last 2 years, where we started to look at how we can research and help to shape national policy. Last year, we submitted a report to the Treasurer ahead of the budget, and we saw a small change in the law where the local housing allowance was actually unfrozen last year. This year's report, we've been focusing on what we're calling hidden homelessness. So this is supporting people who, for some reason, don't sort of meet the threshold for threatened homelessness or actual homelessness. And I thought the best way to explain it might be around giving a short example. So this lady that we interviewed was a single mum with an 11-year-old boy. She's also a carer for her father. So he has osteoporosis and fibromyalgia, and they live in the village, same village, so she's able to care for them. Sadie then received an S21 no-fault eviction, and at that point approached the local authority and said, I'm going to be made homeless, did absolutely the right thing. The local authority was able to house or to offer housing to Sadie, but it was actually 30 miles away. And the reality of that is it was 3 buses, and actually the buses didn't all match each other. So you can't actually get there and back to help care for your dad on a daily basis. So she was literally, she had to turn down the house. She has subsequently moved in with her son to her dad's single 1-bed flat. So there's now 3 people living in very unsustainable, unhealthy, unhappy conditions. She describes herself as being stuck. She can't see any way out, and yet she isn't presenting as homeless on a technical side of things. So we did a lot of research with the university. We spoke to frontline agencies, we spoke to members of the public, and conducted in-depth interviews with clients. That report was published a couple of weeks ago, and we're now submitting some evidence to the to the Public Select Committee on Homelessness. So what we learned really is that people in these circumstances don't really consider themselves to be homeless. So it's very difficult to measure the size and the scale of the problem. But what we're very clear about is living in these uncrowded and unsustainable conditions does impact on people's physical and mental health. Thank you. So now we're a little bit more upbeat. This is how we're going to help resolve these issues that we face. So this is a photograph of our team. We've got a really super team of 80 plus people who are volunteers and staff. Last year we took them to Buckfast Abbey as a thank you for their work, and this was the feeling that you get from that. I'm really proud of the people who work for us. Everybody is highly trained, they're committed, and most of our volunteers have got more than 10 years service. Our volunteers donate around 16,000 hours a year, and that equates to nearly £400,000 worth of savings in terms of salary costs to us as our charity. Okay, if you could just move on, thanks. And how do we actually sort of run and configure our service across the South Hams? So we've got different channels that people can access us through, some face-to-face service, some by telephone, some by email, and of course some people do still resort to letter. Our face-to-face services at 10% is a big change from where we were pre-COVID. but it's absolutely essential that we retain those services. We know that the people who come to us here in Fulton House or at one of our outreaches in the 4 market towns are the most vulnerable people. They probably most likely don't have access to a car. They maybe struggle to access digital services. They need help organising paperwork. It's very much a sort of hands-on approach with that group of clients. And then you can see there we do the bulk of our other work either by telephone or by responding to letters and following up with emails. I think what's interesting around the telephone advice is that we can actually measure unmet demand through that. So all the phone calls that have been missed where we haven't been able to answer the calls. Nationally, for citizens' advice, that sits at around 25%, which is shocking. So that means 1 in 4 phone calls is getting answered, 3 in 4 aren't. Sorry, is that right? Yeah. And then for us, it's more like 50%. So we do manage to answer around 50% of the calls of people who want to contact us on the phone. And given that that's our sort of almost biggest area of work, it's quite significant that there's 50% of those people not able to get through. So we see that as entirely unsatisfactory. We're doing absolutely everything we can to try and bolster that number. And we've created a partnership with Teambridge and Exeter to try and build a bit of capacity within our system. So that seems to be working well and the numbers are going in the right direction, but still a little bit more work to do. Okay, so the impact that we have. We are very fortunate with our data system, as I've mentioned, that we can record very clearly the number of people that we've helped and the advice issues that we've helped with. So the numbers there, I think, speak for themselves. Over £1 million of financial gain has been generated for our clients in 23-24. So that's when we help somebody to gain a benefit. It might be helping them get universal credit. It might be help with a PIP appeal. It might be that somebody presents to us without a washing machine and actually they haven't got any money to buy a new one. So we'll find some money and enable them to buy those white goods. So what we do is we add all of those things together and annualise the amount. So every year we generate over £1 million. And the likelihood is that that money is going to stay in the local economy. Okay, there's also nearly £400,000 of debt being written off there. Thank you. Yeah, and then, sorry. And on the next slide, you can see that we estimate these savings to partner organisations, but it's looking at, so if we are helping somebody stay in their job through giving them employment advice or maybe helping them resolve an issue, if we're looking at somebody and helping them stay safe and warm and well at home, that's savings to the NHS and then savings to the criminal justice system. I think these are probably fairly conservative in terms of the actual value that they generate to society. Thank you. We couldn't do all of this work on our own. We are incredibly proud of the partnerships that we have across the district and locally in communities. We work with a variety of partners to enhance our provision and improve our reach. So I thought you might like to hear a little success story. This is a young mum of 2 who we'll call Dinah. She again was presented with an S21 no-fault eviction notice. Again, she approached the local authority and was offered a house. On this occasion, she's accepted it and said, yes, please, I'd very much like to move from Ivybridge to Totnes. However, she presented at our office on Friday, absolutely distraught and in tears. Despite being offered the property, she'd looked round it. There were no carpets, no curtains, no cooker. How are you going to feed your family? How are you going to keep warm in those kind of circumstances? On top of that, there was massive pressure from the social landlord to provide, to sign the contract in a very short period of time. She has dyslexia, so she found that particularly overwhelming. She also needed to pay a deposit or risk losing the property. The deposit of £480 was well outside of her financial reach. She's at the end of her own overdraft. So she'd borrowed that from her dad, who was then at the end of his overdraft. And so the pressures were really mounting. So she presented on Friday. We worked really closely with officers within Southampton District Council to be able to resolve these issues and work together to help her. So we were able to get a discretionary housing payment, some household support fund money, and that has paid the deposit so that she can give the money back to her dad. It has put £400 towards buying a cooker and has helped towards the moving costs. What now she's facing is she's going to still have to do that travel every day. She's got to get her kids back to Ivybridge to get them to school and to get them back every day. And she's got to now sort this house out. So we're going to help her with funding for carpets and curtains. Okay, so I wanted to talk next around our funding strategy. If you just show the next picture, thank you. This might be a little bit of a blast from the past, but I find it quite a useful model. Yay! You haven't seen that for a while. So the Blue Peter Totalizer is the way that I think about covering our core costs every year. So we set out at the beginning of the year, we say, right, what do we expect our costs to be? We've got rent, we've got membership fees, we've got IT equipment and training, we've got recruitment and retention of volunteers, we've got training and quality assurance. So how much is that going to cost us? And every year we set out a bit of a map in terms of how we need to meet those costs. If you look onto the next slide, it will show you what proportion of that is met by the local authority. So every year our core costs are going up, which I think is to be fairly expected. We've got cost of living awards in there and investment in IT. And if you go back to 21-22, what you can see is the piece in blue is money that has been very kindly granted from Southampton District Council and Devon County Council, and it equates to 45% of our core costs. We were very grateful to get an uplift in 23-24. But because our costs are rising, it's actually a diminishing proportion of what we need to find each year. So in 25-26, we are anticipating that if everything remains static in terms of those two grants, then that would cover 38% of our running costs. So the question then is, well, where do we get the rest of the money from? So we have tried fundraising in its traditional sense, which is sort of tin rattling and cake sales. And we did the Dragon Boat event once down in Totnes. And to some extent, we were successful. We raised one year about £10,000, but it just doesn't go far enough to be able to meet that orange section of the graph. So yes, please, if you just go on to the next slide. This is how it's sort of a conceptual model of our funding model. So what you've got in the centre is our core service, our generalist advice. This is where people can walk in off the street and ask for help or ring up our phone number. And then we have areas where we specialise in specific elements of advice. So we've got benefit specialists, money and debt advice specialists, energy specialists and health specialists. And then further to that, we've got community-based support like within the Trestle Trust at Ivybridge. So by seeking funds in these specific areas where we know we've got expertise, we're able to draw in funds from external organisations. We then put paid staff into those projects. So they are set targets and they have to meet certain numbers of clients and outcomes and all that kind of stuff. But a proportion of the income that's generated goes into our Blue Peter Totalizer. And then by the end of the year, we just about manage to make ends meet. And then we roll over and then we start the whole process all over again. So I think my message to you there is that the funding from the local authority is very, very important to our sustainability. Anything that you can do to give us longevity of that so that we can have sight of it into the future would give us a sense of security. But it's still incredibly hard work meeting those financial costs every year. Okay, thank you. Looking ahead to our priorities. This is our annual business plan, and these are how we are envisaging that our advice service will develop over this year and into the next 2 years. So our ambition is to be an outstanding information on advice service. I think to some extent we already achieved that. We are known within Devon for punching above our weight. It would be really nice to sustain that, build on our service, share our expertise with partners more widely. Our two priorities there are to meet demand with better outcomes. So how can we help clients more? What prevention can we do? How can we stop clients getting into these difficulties in the first place? And then to target our resources at those that need us most. And how do we expect to deliver that? Well, we're going to maintain our local voice for local people. So that's doing our research and campaigns work and our local comms in the papers and online. Being accessible to all is very much about maintaining our face-to-face services, particularly outreaches across the district. And if there were opportunity, we would extend those to other towns across the area. Efficient and effective is about driving down our internal costs. So looking really carefully around, is there anything that we're duplicating? Are there areas of waste that we could remove from our systems and our organisation? Long-term sustainability in the main is funding and looking for funding pots that will give us 2 to 5 years worth of security. We've got a couple of those at the moment, but they are drawing to a close. So we're sort of looking now for new funds that would help give us that sort of sense of into the future. But we're also looking around young people. I talked about us being a household name, but actually if you went to a group of 16 to 25-year-olds, would they know citizens' advice? So what is it that we can do with that generation? How can we encourage them to come and volunteer with us and make sure that they've got access to the information and support that we can provide into the future? And in terms of being a great place to work, that's very much about maintaining our culture and our ethos and supporting our volunteers and clients to do the best job that they can. Okay, so that brings me pretty much to the end of my presentation. I think what we've talked about is the complexity of advice and how when people present to us, they are quite often at the lowest ebb and they need all the support that they can, but they will be facing interrelated and multiple issues. We've seen that demand is going up and we're fully expecting it to go up again this winter. But we are pleased, delighted really, that the team that we have around us can really support our clients and do such a good job for them. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Janie. I'd just like to pass on my thanks for the work you do and citizen advice do in the South Hams. Hopefully we can keep the questions short and concise. I'll go to Bernard, Councillor Taylor first.
Fine. Yeah. Do you get many calls for your advice on the income management? Because that seems to be the core of a lot of things, that people don't know really how to manage their income, and that runs them in trouble.
Yes, so it's not likely that somebody would present to us and say, I'm not sure how to manage my finances, but they will present to us in debt or in a housing crisis. What we can then do is work with people to look at how they to maximise their income. What we want to do in the future, and we're just piloting a bit of work at the moment, is around helping prevent the reoccurrence. So what happens fairly often is that people come to us in debt, we'll help them resolve the issues, and then at some point later they find themselves back in debt again. So what we want to do is a piece of work into the future with clients that will help give them those skills that you're talking about. We're piloting that at the moment and we're hoping to sort of grow that over the next 2 to 3 years.
Councillor Dennis, you got a question?
Thank you, and that was really interesting presentation. I know when I first got elected, I came and spoke to the team there, and yeah, I just found it very interesting and helpful. So thank you. I just got a couple of questions actually. So the first one is, I've just been looking at the accounts. There's something in there about district council outreaches, which was a project. I wonder if you could just tell me what that was.
Yes. So at the moment, the funding that we received from South Hams District Council is £60,000, which we put towards our core, and then we ring fence £10,000 specifically for the outreaches. So that makes a contribution towards the costs of delivering services in Kingsbridge, Ivybridge, Totnes and Dartmouth.
Thank you, that's brilliant. So, I mean, you obviously asked of the council for a longer term commitment of funding. So can I ask Steve for an understanding of how we currently commit? Do we commit it on a yearly basis or on a 2 or 5 year? What's the current situation?
I'm going to defer to Neil Hawke. Neil, are you there? You can give more detail.
I am. Sorry, I'm not there. Snow and ice. So we currently commit to a 4-year funding cycle, Councillor Dennis, and that one's up for review next year. So the likelihood is that we'll extend for a further year, subject to exec agreement, but then we'd look to commission for a longer period, or to provide that funding for a longer period of time, maybe 4 years, maybe longer, but we'd look for a minimum of 4 years.
Thank you. So I guess, Janie, it's that year that you're worried about, that we're only going to commit next time for 1 year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your report, and it's a fascinating insight into the local landscape, certainly demonstrating households' circumstances and the pressures that seem to be being brought to bear on families, and I don't think there's actually ever, I haven't seen a metric or a series of metrics that just have perhaps bring it home the key subjects that are of concern, and it obviously paints quite a dark picture, but I I have engaged with your local officer in our neck of the woods too, but this has been certainly an update in my experience and understanding of citizens' advice. I'm going to ask, on the back of that conversation, when it comes to other citizens' advice spread out across the country, how do they engage with their local, similarly, like you do with South Hams District Council, in terms of the length of the agreed partnership for funding periods? Currently 4 here. What do you know how that reflects in other citizens' advice around the country?
I think it's fairly variable. Some, I don't want to put ideas out there. Some organisations contract their citizens' advice, so they actually have a commissioning process, and then it would go out to tender. Other organisations, other local authorities actually don't provide that grant funding service at all. And what we find is that so sometimes they then don't provide the core service, and they can only provide the specialist advice around the edge. So you're sort of missing quite a chunk of the support. So the relationship that we have with you is a really fruitful one, and it's something that we want to sort of sustain and develop, really.
I understand. And presumably something within that is that there's a desire to be able to, a longer period of an agreement permits you the opportunity to plan for greater periods of time that enable you to do work or to increase or expand the work that you're doing, or refine it, for want of a better expression.
Yeah.
And that's the main benefit of that extended period of security.
Yes, it is. I think, and some of the work which is going on at the moment on the debt, we were talking about trying to deal with some of what we might call the frequent flyers. That's a long-term project and something you can't just solve in a few months. The other thing I would add, that the actual business model of all the local CAs vary a bit. Ours relies very much on a large team of volunteers. We're very lucky here. We have a large number of volunteers, which really makes us excellent value. Other citizens' advice, particularly in the large urban areas, for example, Plymouth, Birmingham and places, they rely upon far more paid staff, whereas we don't. We have a very small core of paid staff. I just made that comment.
I've got one final question, which is one question that came up to my mind, was what do you do with the value you create? And I suppose what I mean by that is that you have quite a lot of data that you generate from the work that you do. Is there as such? You're talking about revenue, income, and so forth. Is there anything that other citizen advisors do with the information that they create by virtue of sharing it with? I'm not quite sure who, but people who might use it as a valuable tool to be able to sell services or so forth.
So there's 2 schools of thought on this. So one is that the data exists and it's almost like a national treasure, and it should be made available to organisations. So Devon County Council are interested in it, and I think is it the JNSA? They would be interested in pulling our data into that. However, and I'll be perfectly honest, there is a little bit of resistance. Some people within the wider organisation treat that data as a very valuable asset that should actually help us generate income. So there's a little bit of a tussle going on at the moment in terms of what we do with it. So it's absolutely valuable, and we do use it to influence policy. We haven't done anything practical with it just yet.
Yeah. But I would add that because of our partnership with South Hams, we would always share as we do with yourselves.
Thank you very much. I'll quickly go to Councillor O'Callaghan on Teams, and I'll go to Councillor Hopwood.
Oh, thank you. Let's get my camera on. Yeah, thank you. And it was good to see you, Janie. I went to the Hidden Homelessness event, and it was really interesting, and discussed it with our housing team, homelessness team. And so that was really useful. Just on what you've been talking about, the outreach specifically, can I just ask, because I was at the Kingsbridge Care Hub yesterday, I think it was, yes, which is next to where your outreach is in Kingsbridge. And the Care Hub does a number of things. And one of the things it seems to be, they were telling me it seems to be doing increasingly, is helping people fill in forms, things like pension credit, etc. And they said that they've been referred, I mean, they may have got this wrong, they may have been referred from the outreach team because they didn't fill in forms. Now, can you expand on what the situation is? Because I would have thought the Citizens Advice Outreach would have been able to help people fill in forms. So I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, thank you very much for raising that issue. I think that might be a communication breakdown. So when we're offering an outreach, we do a sort of mini triage, if you like. We call it a gateway. So we sit down with a client, identify the presenting issue, and then any really significant deadlines or other priorities that they might need to consider. And that's the first point of contact. Somebody wouldn't, in that opportunity there, they wouldn't have time to fill in a form. But what we should have done is offered them an appointment to be able to come back and get that form filled in. So if that didn't happen, that's a bit disappointing.
So would they be able to go back to Kingsbridge to fill it in? I think it's often elderly people who can't get to Fullerton, you know, or have trouble. So would they be able theoretically to fill in the form via the outreach service in Kingsbridge, do you think?
Not the way we're currently set up, no. We're only doing the gateway services. So I think that is a need, and it's part of what we would like to do going forward, is to put what we would call an advice appointment in the afternoon. But we are, even though we've got such a large team, we actually find that there are days where there's just not enough people to offer the services. So we're sort of struggling to meet demand.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to just say that with the CA, if we didn't have this organisation, the impact on this council would be significant for officers. So we have to be mindful that the money we budget for them every year is worth tenfold, because without that we would have a significant impact on council officers. And unfortunately we're not considering the money for CA today, but I just think, you know, when you're looking at the budget for next year, you need to remember what you've been told today in the presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Steve?
Thank you very much. Just going back to Councillor Edie's point, as you'll all be aware, we are a shared officer organisation with another council, and I can assure you that the Citizens Advice team in South Hams far exceeds the Citizens Advice team for the other council. And I think we're really in a privileged position to have Janie and the team in South Hams, and it is completely different in different areas for multitudes of reasons, but it is we've got one of the best, absolutely. So that's my first point. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One relates to the stats that you put up about the percentage increase. That percentage increase was first half of this year. So when I'm looking at your report and it says that you dealt with 1,500 people in relation to debt, and you're saying a 50-odd% increase in that, you're talking about another 750 people. No? Right.
I knew I hadn't quite got that right. So if both years were the same, then you would expect it to be 50% at the 6-month mark. Right. So then at the 6-month mark, any line that was over 50%, I've listed on that graph. Does that make more sense?
I'm glad I asked that question.
Thank you.
Now, then.
Yes,
thank you.
Yeah.
My second question related to outreach in terms of you list Dartmouth, Kingsbridge, and Ivybridge. Obviously, we've got lots of smaller villages as well. I mean, in terms of the use of that outreach service, you know, do you have people knocking on your door, waiting for you when you get there? And, you know, do you end up turning people away because you've got to go because you haven't got the staff? And you know, one of the things that regularly gets raised by councillors is that we're not just the towns, we are the villages as well. And sometimes the people who can't get there are the people that most need the help. Just wondered what your views and observations are on that.
Thank you. So running the outreaches is costly, and it's a very unknown quantity what the demand's going to be. Sometimes 1 or 2 people turn up. Other weeks you can be seeing 12 in a morning, and that's our volunteers are absolutely flat out at that stage, just like, here's some information, off you go, write it up, and it's so because of the variation, it is really hard to sort of answer very directly. if we have talked ages ago about having an advice bus. I'm not really sure that that's the way forward, but I think if we can locate ourselves or co-locate alongside other charities, that's the way that we can provide a more consistent sort of referral process and meet demand better. So we've had absolutely fantastic success locating at the Trussell Trust Food Bank in Ivybridge. So even though we've actually got an outreach in Ivybridge, we're seeing a completely different group of people coming into the food bank because they're regular users. They didn't really trust us, in all honesty, to start with. And then because we've been there for over a year, we're suddenly trusted. We're part of their team. They can make the food bank can make a direct referral in, or just give somebody a nudge and say, come on, you've been coming here 6 weeks now. Let's see if we can get Citizens Advice to have a chat with you. So looking sort of geographically across South Hams, we're very focused on the towns. If we could get some funding, it could be an avenue of work for us to do to build up those relationships and offer a more village-based approach. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions before I finish? Oh, okay. I'll go to Councillor De Winter, then I'll go to Councillor Steele.
Yeah, hello. I was just wondering why next year it's only a 1 year budget commitment.
Go on, Neil.
Thanks, Councillor De Winter. I think we've got a number of key partners, but we're also developing our plans around community development and assessing which community groups we want to work with in the future. And we need time to really develop that framework to do it justice. I mean, I think it's pretty likely, without going before members have decided, that we will continue to support Citizens Advice into the future. But we have a number of key partners, 7 or 8 of them at the moment, that we do fund. But also there's a whole host of other organisations across the district that we don't fund and haven't funded. So we need to make sure the approach we take is the right one, and that's just going to take some time to do. So we will be, although it's a 1 year funding agreement, which will take the organisation through until March 2026, we will be starting working with all of our key partners early next year in terms of the longer term plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Steele had a question.
Thanks very much. So, do you get funding from the government as well? No. So I see all those savings you had for the NHS and Department of Work and Pensions and criminal justice system, those are savings for the government, but they don't give you any money.
They don't fund us. No,
that's
we
interesting.
do. Yeah, National Citizens Advice is commissioned to run the help to claim service. So in that sense, there is some funding from government, but it doesn't come directly to our office. What we are doing across Devon is trying to make the case with NHS Devon that the work that we do actually sustains people's health and well-being, and that actually if the NHS is looking at prevention, then we should be very much part of their offer. It's been a very, very long, hard conversation, but I think there might be a little bit of an opening in the future.
It is a common misconception that people think that we are partly funded by the government. In fact, a lot of people think we are a government service, whereas actually we are all independent charities.
Yeah. So I think it's been touched on briefly, but it'd be interesting if it's possible to quantify in some way the benefits to the council, council upward. And Steve said, it could be 10 times the amount that we're giving you. It would be really interesting to, might be difficult, but just to see how much the council is benefiting from supporting it. Thank you.
I think Councillor Birch had a question. No? No, sorry, McKay, sorry.
I wanted to you mentioned when you in your presentation about calls not answered, and you suggested about 50%. It's a bit of an alarm, especially as the demand is obviously going up and up and up. There's 50% of people aren't getting the help that they need. What do you know what the cause of that is? Is it the telephone system, or is it the lack of volunteers to answer the calls, or what's actually the cause of it?
It's simply capacity. We don't have enough volunteers, and it's simple as that. If we have more volunteers, and of course the other factor it's worth noting, we don't know how many of those people return, so they may not get through the first time, but a percentage of those will try again and will get through to us. But we are always after more volunteers. We have increased our capacity partly due to COVID. Before, we used to only have, it used to be face-to-face in the office. Now, as you've seen before, we now do most of our service by phone, which means we can have more capacity. We can have volunteers based at home and in the office. But we always want more volunteers.
Perfect, thank you very much. I'm going to call time on it now, I'm afraid. Okay, quick question from Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, thanks for all the work you do. I work for the NHS and I signpost lots of people to CAB actually. But yeah, I just wondered how much it costs you as an organisation to train a volunteer. Do you have a figure for that? I mean, is it?
No, is the short answer. So we have never sort of sat down and analysed the costs. We try wherever we can to bring volunteers in groups and sort of run training sessions. But actually, we, as Chris just alluded to, it's so important for us to grow our volunteer base that actually if somebody comes in the door and they pass our interview, we'll actually take them on at the moment and train them and get them going.
And how long does that take?
It's sort of a 3 to 4 month training session at 1 day a week. So it is fairly lengthy, and we find that people need a huge amount of support in just having the confidence to pick the phone up, and you literally don't know what the question is you're going to be asked. You've got to be sort of ready and on the ball. So it's quite often it's not building skills, it's building confidence.
Okay, thanks.
And having been there, the training is very, very thorough, and so once you do finally pick up the phone, you do actually, and you actually lead people in by the hand. So you do it with a buddy initially, and it's very effective and very thorough. Yeah.
Sorry, it was just another point of note that obviously your second largest expenditure is the rent that you pay us to be in the building. So that's obviously the other figure that we control and presumably are able to give you some commitment in terms of, you know, whether that's going to go up or down.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Janie, and also thank you to Chris for coming along. Hopefully the council will take the words of Councillor Hopwood when it comes to the budget, and we appreciate the work you do. So thank you very much. So the recommendations was to note the citizens' advice impact report and also to consider. Yeah, can we take them together? Would you have to vote? Yeah, yeah, happy to vote. Anybody going to propose? Councillor Dennis, seconder. Councillor Steele, all those happy? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We quickly move on to our item 8, community service update. Councillor Abbott's here, so I'm just going to hand over to you.
So the community service has almost 2 parts to it, because Councillor Thomas looks after community services with people, but I'm looking after community services with infrastructure, and I work closely with Mr. Molyneux and various officers, Mr. Noyce and colleagues, and plenty of other people as it tears down towards ground level operations. So it is very much the everyday work of the council. It's not often groundbreaking unless you're using a spade. It is the things that are done on a day-to-day basis, and I hope that you think that they're going well, and you'll be telling me and my colleagues when they're not. Do you want me to address any particular issues?
I've got nothing personally. Anybody on the committee got anything? I think maybe if you concentrate on the issues which you aren't meeting yet, as opposed to the ones you are hitting the target, because.
So it's been the absolute concentration of staff time has been to make sure that the waste service operates properly, and and the statement today, earlier on today, was that we've now much better than our target of 80. We're at something like 71 missed collections. It is the case that some people get missed collections on a regular basis, and it just seems not to work quite correctly. And these items then are then chased up and hopefully will be resolved. But yes, you will get examples of miscollections, and unfortunately sometimes repeat miscollections. And in this team too, then there's been an absolute overwhelming use of officers' time in making the car parking work. The recomputation of all of the prices under the various different combinations that can occur goes on, and I think you'll all really be ready to praise the staff for the effort that they put in and that dedication of just keeping going when town councils come up with another truly bright idea, but it's nevertheless something to be readdressed again. I think that there are quite a few really positive things, and you want me to talk at the other end, but we have started employing oh my goodness, that's the word. What was it? Thank you, apprentices. And this is a great extension for youth, probably youth more than anyone, but not restricted to that, opportunity and employment on the job and a trade being learned. And we've got people in 3 or 4 different areas. Steve, I think that. Are you allowed to answer because you're at the top table? Yeah. 3 or 4 different areas. It's and that's just very good. There are opportunities that we have not yet got to. So I came in 23 thinking that there are challenges for our residents on the new estates where they may not be interacting as much as their own benefit would let me try that sentence again. They would do better for themselves if they interacted with the management companies more than they did. And at some stage, when we have capacity, we can look forward to offering a management service of cutting the grass, because that's what we do anywhere elsewhere, or of maintaining various parts of the estate, because we have very competent and able and expert carpenters and so on, that we can do that sort of work. So I look forward to the opportunities in the future where we can give our staff both greater job satisfaction, because there'll be more that they can do and add to their work, and also that will help the council to expand and be self-sufficient and have resilience. Well, I think that's really opportunity, but it's not there yet. We're not there yet.
Thank you very much. Steve wants to make a point.
Yeah, just building on what Councillor Abbott said there, and I've said this before, maybe not in this committee, but don't underestimate the amount of management resource that was taken out of the community services area to fix the waste issue. And as a result of that, for the last sort of 3.5 years, we've had a number of sort of temporary appointments in place, which in its own right then creates a sort of a workforce which is basically not managed as well as it could be, and discontented, and lots of change going on. One of the things that Mr. Noyce has done, Stuart's done, is bring a really stable set of team leaders into the team. And as a result of that, we've started to see performance improve in lots of areas. In the past, for example, things like grass cutting, a lot of the areas that were cut was in people's heads rather than documented and written down. So, you know, it was the guy who always cut the grass, always in this place at this time of the year, and it was going off sort of past learned behaviour rather than what should we be doing, when should we be doing it, let's have a proper structure. And one of the things the team have been doing is starting to build all of that up. So in terms of Are we where we want to be? No, we're not. Are we going in the right direction? Absolutely, we are. And picking up on something Councillor Hotwood raised in the executive meeting about street cleansing, that's showing us amber at the moment on there. One of the things we want to do is we want to bring the grounds maintenance team and the street cleansing teams together, because in reality, if you think about it, it's no good cutting the grass and then leaving the litter or leaving the weeds. So that's the ambition for the next 12 months, is to try and bring that together and create a workforce where you're actually doing everything to do with the grounds at the same time. So making sure all the streets are clean and the areas that we are responsible for maintaining are maintained. So we're starting to make some progress. We are bidding this week for Totnes Town Council's grounds maintenance contract, which will generate an income. So we're starting to go in the right direction. The apprentices are in the property services team. We have just recruited 2 arborists. For 12 months, we've not had a tree team. We've been outsourcing all of it, and a business case was done to look at, actually, is it just cheaper to outsource it and contract it out? And reality is it's not. It would be cheaper to have our own team, but we've not been paying them the right rates, so we've not been getting the right quality people. We've now amended those rates, looked at the marketplace. We've now got recruited 2 out of 3.
So 2 full times, then the apprentice.
Right, okay. So we're starting to build up that capacity again now. So I just wanted to add a bit of detail there.
Thank you very much, Steve. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Dennis?
I have a few, but I won't do them all in one go. Just to go back to that point, I'm just a bit confused about the capacity of the team to take on town council's cleaning provision when there are areas in my ward and parishes that the current grounds maintenance team aren't on top of and aren't looking after. So I would much rather they were actually working on the district council owned spaces before they start doing other people's. But perhaps you can enlighten me there.
You're right, of course, that we must look after our own first, but it is a real opportunity to use the skills and expertise that is therefore within our scheme, within our council, to make benefits elsewhere. It doesn't stop us looking forward.
Councillor Steele?
Thank you. So a question about waste and recycling. So we're doing really well on the collections, just a few missed. But recycling, household recycling rates of 51%. So what does that mean? People are not using their bins?
I have help on this.
Yeah, I think you're on the next report now, or is it in this report as well? It is the next report, really. So if we could cover it then, if that's all right.
So just a question. So street cleansing, I know it's in the plan. We've actually had some really good compliments from residents about the grass cutting, so I think that's under control. Yes. Now it's down to leaves. There's a lot of leaves building up on streets. We haven't had any accidents yet, but it's good to get
yes, I saw your conversation on social media this morning, was it, or last night, and also there was something else that I've just started to have a conversation with officers on these. I'm afraid, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, these are both Ivy Bridge examples, but you will have similar, and there are things to be chased up, and please chase me, and I will try and liaise.
Thank you very much. Just to note that I saw the street cleansing guy in Dartmouth sweeping up the leaves yesterday, so it is happening. Councillor Bond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm new to this committee, and I'm interested in the sort of format of the report, really, the format of the KPI report. And I'm very pleased that a lot of it's green, but I'm also surprised looking at the detail that not much of it seems to have a timeline. Yes, you can be wherever you want.
What report are we on?
We're looking at. I'm looking at the thematic update. Is that on?
Yeah, that's right. Then.
I'm looking at page unlabeled page 49, I think. It's part of thematic update. Community services. Second page. So as an example, deliverable, monitor performance to demonstrate increase in recycling rates. It kind of suggests we weren't monitoring performance before. Is that correct? I mean, if you're not monitoring performance, then putting in a performance monitoring is a good idea. But surely we've been monitoring recycling rates for a very long time. I'm just wondering, you know, are these KPIs or are these sort of actions really delivered? Because if they don't have a date, then how can we judge whether they're late or not? And if they're things we've been already doing, then how much of an achievement are they? I don't know. I'm not trying to cast aspersions because there's a lot of good stuff here. I'm more questioning the wording of the report.
Very interesting analysis. Thank you. I think we should work on that, and maybe we could have a conversation to try and pull out all your ideas and improve it. Good.
Councillor Eady, and then Steve.
Well, I think the only thing I was going to point out, which is what we alerted us a minute ago, is that when it comes to the KPI, there's a KPI report that follows this, of which I understand this point you made about the item on number 40, page 49, will feed into. So the point is the highlights there section says this activity completed with the service now being monitored and business as usual. Well, the KPIs that report on that particular service comes into the section that comes next, which is where it is the arena which we then scrutinise to address that point you just made. I think.
Yeah, if I may, it's perhaps not a KPI. It's the status of the action. There's some actions here, and are the actions new actions? Are they done in a timeline? I mean, none of them. It's great to see none of them are off track or late.
Councillor Bonham, I think Neil wants to come in. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bonham. Just to I think to address your point. So this sets out the overall update and an assessment of performance of each of the actions within the delivery plan. Behind this document is a massive spreadsheet, and it is absolutely massive, that has a range of dates on it and key milestones within it that as officers we review on a monthly basis with relevant lead members to make sure that the plan's on track. So although for simplicity we're saying it's green, it's on track, there's a massive spreadsheet that sits behind all of this with all of the detail and the milestones so that we can be reassured that what we're presenting to you is an accurate position of where we are. So hopefully that goes some way to covering off that point. And I think that there is a mix within the delivery plan of actions that were things that maybe we needed to improve on or specific projects. So we are looking at clarifying some of these things in the year 2 delivery plan, and we'll be working with executive to extract some of the business as usual activities from the delivery plan where we can.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. That is helpful to understand. I mean, I think perhaps it's just a case of thinking of the wording as it's presented so that it's not business as usual and has a timeline. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Taylor?
Not a question, really, just to say I think it's a great move that they now got a grass cutting programme coming together for next year, because we've been working in tandem, if you like, random, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it didn't work too well because one got cut every month, another one got cut every 2 months or 3 months. But now, talking to the team the other day, you're now putting together a grass cutting programme, which seems to me a great idea.
Just on that, and as Councillor Bonham will know from the Audit and Governance Committee, there was an audit that was pretty damning in terms of property maintenance and asset management. And one of the other things that we've been doing is the community services team and the property maintenance team now meet with the assets team and review the asset maintenance programme. So there is a clear set of dates of when we go and do certain activities on certain buildings and certain assets, which again wasn't in place. It was almost done really reactive as to when somebody said something had gone wrong. So we're in a far better place than we were, but there's still a way to go.
Councillor Dennis.
It's really reassuring because I pointed out a patch of land that we've been cutting the grass on for the last 8 years, having sold the patch of land 8 years ago. So it's good to hear that there's some joined up thinking now, even if it is just looking at the asset map and matching it up with where the teams are. So I'm really pleased to see the accessible play equipment on here. I think that's great, and looking forward to that audit of the play areas. Just wondered what 2 toilets are being refurbished. Have you got a quick answer on that one?
So the one that I know about is, as a ward member, that would be a defence, wouldn't it? Will be that Ivy Bridge is on the list for being refurbished, and I don't know whether when you say 2, whether that's because the disabled is being done separately.
So there is a second toilet, and I'm just trying to remember. Is it Modbury in my head? But sorry, I just got from the top of my head. But there's 2 toilets this year where we've had the quotes from the contractors to do the work. Obviously, we're a little bit tied up with parking at the moment, but that work's probably going to be led by property services now rather than Emma because she's a bit tied up. So that work we're still hoping to get done this financial year, and we've also put a capital bid in for next year for another 2 toilets to be refurbished, but we haven't decided which toilets yet. I think what we've just completed is the planned property maintenance schedule for all of the toilets. So now all of the toilets have a schedule of maintenance. I think from that we'll come back which of the next 2 toilets probably need the refurb. The idea is that we have an annual programme so that all our toilets get done over a period of 10 years.
Sorry, just a couple more points. Oh, go on.
A bonus, though, on your question is that I hope this is actually going to go ahead. We have an intention to try audio description in the toilet for the disabled in Ivy Bridge to see if that is a benefit. I have heard, so only that it works for a person with a reduced sight capability, and he's seen it in Newton Abbot and he found it very useful. At the moment, the reason I retain a watch over this is because we don't want it to be disturbing to those with dementia to be talked to out of the blue if that was to be a negative occurrence. So we're going to try it and see how it goes, and that could be a real advantage as well on the you mentioned.
Sorry.
Last question, Councillor Dennis.
Yes, please. Two more. The OSSR plans that's referred to, so it references the Totnes one being completed and approved. Is there any support in-house for the councils that don't have those in place or need to review them?
Can I have help?
Sorry, I'm trying to get which action point are you referring to?
Primary aim 3, it says develop a sport and recreation plan that reflects the needs of our communities. Joint sports plan update meeting with Plymouth City Council and the consultant have taken place. Totnes OSSR now completed and approved by Town Council, supported by SHDC. So what was that support? I'm just conscious that the Salcombe Town Council need to review theirs. So
that would
what support
sit
did
with
they
Chris
get?
Brooks and the leisure team that isn't in community services. I think, although this is drafted as community services, they're not all in my team. So there is parts on there as well that are play areas which sit with assets. So unless Steve knows.
I don't know, but we'll take that question away and get you an answer, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. And just the last one, just a point of note. I mean, I strongly believe that the district council should be maintaining and looking after the assets that it has to the best it can. And then above and beyond that, you have fantastic voluntary and community groups that obviously are going out there and doing some of that work, such as Kingsbridge in Bloom, but we also have a sort of Salcombe Green team now. And I do think there are opportunities to potentially to encourage those groups by providing equipment, you know, a bit like Devon County do with the road warden scheme. And, you know, I'm sure that could be a quick win.
Yes, thank you. And even in the previous administration too, there was this interest in when do council staff sweep the roads and litter pick, because there are voluntary litter pick teams going out, and from a personal perspective, I don't want to pick the day before they go out or the day after. So yes, you're right, and knowing the plans, it is difficult, I think, for the teams to set exact dates, because the weather changes or an emergency happens, and staff have to go around, and so to guarantee absolutely that something will happen on a day is challenging, but we're not quite there yet, even in an approximation, which might be all that comes out. But there's so much of advance been made on scheduling that things will, I think things are brighter.
Yeah, it's definitely an ambition for next year. I think the concentration this year is to get our teams working safely, equipment replaced, schedules in place. I would really like to work and create some more friends of groups to do improvements to our parks and open spaces. At the moment, we're probably doing the basic maintenance of those, but it would be nice to enhance them by using volunteers. And actually, there's a lot of people who retire who would like to work in a green environment for half a day a week, and if we can get a person to go out and give the training and do it safely, then that'd be a great advantage for the council.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Orme?
Thank you, Chairman. Just on the subject of street cleansing, once the review of that strategy has concluded, I presume that there'll be some sort of proposals come to council or indeed to this committee, so we can see what kind of ideas are coming forward about getting the fleet sort of back up together and ready to go.
Yes, we certainly need new equipment, don't we? It's breaking down and so on. So there will be we'll be returning. Steve, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we regularly take a report on what's going on with waste and recycling and street cleansing through to the executive, and it will go through that process. And then, of course, there'll be another update within 12 months of the community services back to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you very much. I think that's going to be it. Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott. Oh,
yeah. I just want to make a comment, really. I mean, Modbury toilets was brought up just now, being parochial again, but they probably are the cleanest toilets in the county, I should think, because the team that come and clean them was a young lady. I don't know who it is now, actually. I haven't been there for a long time, but they were brilliant, and they keep it really, and it's, you know, we get full reports on that and a lot of compliments. So well done the team for that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We've got one recommendation, just to make a progress update against the community service section of the council plan. Yeah. Proposed, seconded, all in favour? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott. You can free to go.
Thank you.
So, straight on to item number 9. Key performance indicators, April 2024 to October 2024. Over to Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to present the KPIs for April 2024 to October 2024. If you look on the performance on a page, which is the overall, so it gives you a rough shot, you can look at everything. There are a few that are off target, which are the ones I would presume you want to speak about. Those that we're either missing, we're either hitting or just off. I think, you know, you can leave, but if you have any questions on the ones that are not targets that aren't being hit, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins. Yeah, go for the off-target ones, and then we can go on to any other ones. Councillor Dennis.
Well, I just want to, you know, because we did have questions about the recycling rate, but the Stuart has just gone. So, can you answer those? Okay.
Sorry, what was the question?
So the question is the fact that has gone down, hasn't it? So why has that gone down, basically?
So it is, although it's gone down, it is still above the national benchmark. So the national benchmark, the average for England, is 42.4%, and our target's 57%. So we put our target way above the national benchmark. We're currently on 51%. And I think this is the changeover to the recycling when we put a lot of new houses onto the scheme. I think you'll find as the months go on, that target will, I don't think, I would be surprised if we get up to 57% by the next time these KPIs are reported, but I would think we're on track to go back up to hitting our own target.
Can I help you out on this one then? Thank you. So there is a part of seasonality here, Councillor Dennis, in terms of we have high levels of recycling. You'll see that it peaked before the start of the summer as we'd introduced the new service, and it was showing a marked increase. And then, of course, we get our holiday homes occupied and so on. And the reality is they don't recycle as much. They tend to put stuff. So we are what you end up with. It's sorry.
Sorry, they shouldn't be using the domestic bins, though, should they? So
Holiday homes, yeah. So if you're second homes, second homes.
Second homes, yes.
Yeah.
So holiday homes will be using trade
second
waste.
homes, yeah. Holiday homes, you're quite right, shouldn't. But second homes should. But of course, if you're coming from an inner city area where you stick all your recycling in a bin, the thought of having to separate it and do it yourself is not appealing. So we have an increase in residual rates because the residual rubbish increases because of the vast increase of people, and therefore it makes the recycling rate lower as a percentage, because this is percentage of recycling of residual. That's how this works. So, I mean, generally, we are better than last year, and I expect us to end the year a lot closer to the target than when we started. So I think it's going to continue to improve, and we will be looking at ways of how we get further improvement.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Steele.
So does it need a bit of re-education of residents? Another leaflet. What's the recycling?
Yes, we pay towards an officer along with the other districts that is, there's a very small team of recycling officers that go out and knock on people's doors, and we only have a limited amount of that resource, and we certainly don't have the capacity in the team to do that, but we do try to target that in areas where there's not a lot of recycling. The one thing I've noticed in my walking my dog around Kingsbridge and driving through the South Hams is there's a lot of extra, there you go, bins, extra grey bins, and people, we need to consider as a council whether we have a policy that says, do you know what, we're not going to give you extra grey bins because we want you to recycle more. And at the minute, that's not a policy, but I think it should be, and it's something I will be bringing forward to the executive. So I'm saying me, but of course the lead member will be.
Might be worth mentioning the Taking the Lead project, and we're seconding a member of staff across.
That's a good point. Thank you, Drew. So as an organisation, we're trying to create some capacity for people who are not managers to get some experience in a management role and a bit more breadth of experience across the organisation. And we've created this programme called Taking the Lead, and we've got a number of corporate projects. One is business continuity, one is care leavers, there's another one on equality diversity, but one of them is about recycling. And the idea is that the person who's volunteered for that will spend a little bit of time above and beyond their day job helping to try and increase recycling rates. So thank you, Drew, for pointing that out. So that's what we're doing.
Councillor Eady.
It came up actually in a parish council meeting I had at Sparkwell concerning the food waste bins. and I'm interested to know, in terms of when it comes to recycling, to what extent, when you're measuring recycling rates, does that include food waste? Because it feels like food waste is one aspect that I found in some conversations that it is people are most reluctant to do, is to put food waste in the small grain caddies and things. And I wonder whether that's reflected at all in your in the rate that you reference here, or as it's seen as a whole recycling, or as everything is recycled, as it were, or is it simply?
It does include food waste. The last time we did a waste composition study where somebody actually sits and goes through what's in grey bins, 30% of it was still food waste, which is still really high. Now, so there's 30% of the grey bin contents are food waste when they could be recycled. So there is still work to do on that behaviour. The other negative impact that has in terms of the food waste, in terms of going into the energy from waste plant, therefore lowers the temperature because it makes it less efficient in terms of that. So we're encouraged from Devon County to try and improve that. So it's still an issue, yeah.
But is that what proportion of, do we know what proportion of households don't do that? Is the only way to examine it is by going through great bins? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It is the only. Okay, fine. So that's quite challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, and maybe someone can help me. Have we missed January to April in terms of a report? Because the last one I can find was in March KPIs, and that was April to January. I'm missing one.
Do you want to? Just having a look, Steve. I'm pretty sure we did. I thought we did a year-end report to overview and scrutiny.
I'm sure we did, Chairman. It's definitely, yeah. I don't think well, we won't. We definitely haven't missed one.
It feels like we've had a report since March, but I can't find it in the minutes or the agenda papers. I was just trying to find the comparison figure for the recycling rate. That was all. That's the only reason I was just looking for it, because since December 2023, actually the recycling rate's improved. But I'm missing the figure in the middle.
Okay, I'll check that out, Councillor Dennis. We'll certainly get that across to you. We've got all the information to hand.
Thank you, Neil. Quick question about temporary accommodation. Obviously, it's been cold over the past few days. Are we expecting an early uptick in the use of that?
Izzy, could you answer that one, please, Mrs. Blake?
Yes, hi everybody. We have activated our cold weather provision. So if anybody is rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping, we have a duty to accommodate until the weather improves. So just a message to take that out. We haven't accommodated yet. As of today's date, we've got 37 people in temporary accommodation. 28 of those are singles or couples. So our big increase appears it remains being around one bed need.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, just last question. With regard to all the customer service reports, all looks brilliant. But maybe I'm wrong here, but I think there was a survey conducted recently with everyone that's been in touch with customer service, or was it just trade waste, or was it both? Would we ever get sight of the results of that survey?
Because I read this morning in a report that we are due to have a customer satisfaction survey going out. That was in the exec this morning.
So the customer satisfaction survey has been done by the Institute of Customer Service. It closed last Friday. I'm expecting to see the raw results in the next 2 weeks. So I'll be sharing them with the lead member, and then we'll report them back probably through this committee, actually.
Anything else from anybody? Perfect. Just a recommendation that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider and note the key performance indicators for April to October 2024. Yeah, those in favour? Perfect. All good. Thanks so much. Thank you, Nikki. Councillor Hopwood. Just keep going.
That's
Perfect.
last time we did that.
Yeah, I know. Very well. Item 10, the South West Water recommendations. The committee to discuss and agree the recommendations, which will go to full council on the 5th of December. Going to hand over to Steve.
Just to set some context, members. So when the council motion was put forward, Councillor Birch amended the motion to make sure that the South West Water attending overview and scrutiny, that there was a report back to the council with some definitive actions that were going to be taken. Unfortunately, so we had South West Water in, but then unfortunately, because the end of the committee ended up being a position where it wasn't quorate, we ended up rushing through and not actually agreeing any recommendations to bring back to council. So these were the recommendations that myself and the monitoring officer crafted from the discussion with Councillor Eady and the chair, Councillor Hawkins. So we've just brought them up here, and what we really need to do is agree that we're happy with that, and then we can report this back to council. That's the context.
Councillor Dennis?
Before we discuss that, we obviously resolved that South West Water would provide a response to the questions not addressed to the committee. Were they sent those, and have they responded?
Yes, they were sent to Stuart straight after the meeting. He responded straight back to me to say, yeah, got the questions, we'll provide a response within the time frame, which we gave 2 weeks. I chased up when the deadline was up, no response. I chased again, no response. But I have since received a voicemail to say, really sorry, not been around, should get responses this week. If not, I will continue to chase.
Yep, Councillor.
Yeah, mine was the same question actually, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, because when I went to Kingsbridge Town Council the other day, they also asked for written answers to some of the questions that came up, and that was a few months ago, and they haven't had a response either. So I think we need to be quite persistent and insist that they do get back to us. I mean, it's hard, isn't it, but to hold them to account. But, you know, they did sort of make a promise to do it, so...
Could I suggest then that we add a first recommendation above all of these, that is review the answers to the questions that were posed at the next committee, so that we don't lose track of it in terms of time passes on and so on.
I'm happy with that. Councillor Bonham?
Yeah, I mean, as people probably remember, I was one of the initiators of the initial discussion in council about this topic, prompted by Councillor John McKay, and I have to say I think it's extremely disappointing that they haven't replied I mean, not only that, but they never gave any answers in the meeting last time, in the overview and scrutiny meeting, any substantial answers, despite the fact that we told them what we were going to ask about. So they've had they've actually had 3 opportunities, because we wrote to them after we had the full council meeting, of which they told us they would be delighted to help us, but didn't give any full information. Then we had the meeting itself, they never gave any substantial answers. Then we wrote to them and they never gave any answers at all.
Very briefly, actually, they came in January, wasn't it? And they didn't reply to the request for information in January either. So I think we can see a pattern forming here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, so 4 chances then. So I don't know quite what to do. I would suggest that we write to them, or the chair of Overview and Scrutiny writes to South West Water again, expressing our dissatisfaction, in addition to your point, Steve, of noting it for further consideration in the next meeting, because we're not really getting anywhere, are we?
I mean, and that's that first action. So one thing became clear to me in the meeting is they are hanging everything on this damp and AMP, these plans that get signed off and agreed by Ofwat. Now, that's great, this 5-year plan, but what it doesn't do is it it doesn't relate necessarily to the South Hams, which was the purpose of really pinning them down to, okay, you've got a 5-year plan. What is in the 5-year plan for the South Hams in terms of those 3 items, and when are you going to do it? And to me, that's the important thing. And then if we can pin them down to that, we can then monitor them on that basis, because I'm sure their plan will, all plans, I run operational services, we talked about it a bit, all plans change because of all sorts of events, but at least having something that we can hold them to account on, because they said they'd do the Kingsbridge sewer system or the Malden drainage system or whatever it would be, and they'd said they'd do it in the next 5 years or in 2028, but actually they're not. We want to keep, those are the things that I think we need to keep track of.
Can I say, yes, a scheduled list of works that we were requesting to have delivered by them, so that we can go to our communities and say, X that's broken, well, that's going to be something that's going to be serviced or resolved in X period of time. That is a central part of that issue, I think.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you. So for point number 2, SW will be asked to attend. Can we be more specific on who we want to attend? We don't need a PR person saying, I don't have the answers, I've got to go back. We need the operations people who can give the answers. Could that be part of the recommendations?
If you want to be more specific, to be honest, it's what they say rather than who comes. And we've had various people come to various meetings, and it doesn't matter what level they are; they don't really answer the questions.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. I do actually agree with Councillor Steele that we need to be specific about inviting the CEO to come and actually answer questions here. Because you're right, we have a selection of people with a selection of questions with a whole different selection of answers, most of which don't actually make any sense. So I'd like to see the CEO here, because I'm getting frankly fed up of being told, oh, we don't have access to that information, or we're not the right people to answer that question, or let me go back and find that out for you. Because that's what we've had. We've been kicked into the long grass and we've dragged on for a long ride, and frankly, I'm fed up with it. So I would really like our recommendations here to suggest that the CEO does come to us to answer our questions, first of all. And it's worth mentioning to members that our full council was on the 5th of December. So anything that we put in this recommendation about timelines, we want to hear back by X, we have to consider the fact that that won't actually come into effect until the 1st of December, if that makes sense to members around the table. And just to add, Chairman, that the context to this, at the last meeting, this was put together very, very quickly at the end of the meeting. And it wasn't the fact that we weren't quora, it was the fact that the chairman wanted to close the meeting quickly, and there were a few of us that were not happy about this just being presented. Can I have a proposal second, all those in favour out the door? And a couple of us were not happy with that. So that's why this is here today.
Okay. Are you proposing your amendment?
At this point, yeah, I think I'd like to hear a bit more discussion and debate from the rest of the members. But yes, I would propose an amendment of having the CEO actually named to come and see us. And perhaps not in 12 months, which is what this one suggests, but maybe that she needs to come before us sooner.
I think that's another recommendation. I think South West Water coming every 12 months to update on their plan is what I was envisaging here. I think what you're proposing is an additional action that reiterates what council originally asked, that the CEO comes to the committee or comes to the council. That's what I would say.
Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's what we had, as Steve, you said. We had that in the full committee, that we invite the CEO to the council or a public meeting. I think that is needed now, and probably I should have made it clear. I think we should be writing back to the CEO to say we're disappointed that there's no information. It's pointless writing back to the people that came to our previous meeting because they didn't do anything. So we should be writing back to Susan Davies saying, you know, you gave us a very nice answer last time, but actually nothing's come from that. So please now come to our full council meeting and explain yourself and give us answers that we've already asked 3 times with no success. So I'd support what my colleague said there. Just very briefly, could we see the other recommendations before we conclude the discussion? Because there's some good points in these others. And oh right, sorry. Yeah. But I do agree with well, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, if I may continue, I do think it's really important that we don't just rely on government and agencies in Whitehall and Westminster to fix this. My view is that we really need some local community engagement with our local water company on a formal basis, on an ongoing basis, because we're the ones that are both paying the bills, and our residents are the ones suffering when things go wrong, and our leisure industries and local businesses are the ones that potentially would suffer if there's a downturn in visitor numbers because of poor water quality. So I think I'm kind of thinking about the wording in number one on the previous page, I'm sorry, to do with the community engagement. Number 3, asked to enhance their engagement with community action groups. I just needs tightening up somehow, but I can't quite think of the right word.
Specifically, actually, Councillor Bond, that was a reaction to the community action groups, for example, that we had in the meeting. Other groups, certainly the groups that I've engaged with locally, that addresses feedback that I'd received that actually they had been improving their community engagement with such action groups and more to empower within South West Water those teams such that they can address change at a senior leadership team. And coming back to the point about having CEO in here, I think that is a principle which could be widened to CEO and all senior leadership team, because when we're seeking answers to questions, some of those detailed questions are most likely to not be contained entirely by a CEO. In fact, it may be a case that we could say CEO and senior leadership team to be effective.
Steve, quickly.
Yeah, picking up on what Councillor Bonham said, so I would say we are representing our communities, and therefore Action 1 and Action 2 are effectively this council representing the voice of the communities in terms of, so what you're going to do in the South Downs and when you're going to do it. And I think, in my view, that is the council representing its communities. I think it's not Action 3, which is a specific action.
Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I just one thing. Presumably, this is a recommendation to full council, is it?
Yes, so it can be amended there.
Yeah, but should it go to the executive first? I don't know. I'd leave that to officers to determine. But in the it needs to be a recommendation to full council, in my view. But therefore, just bear in mind, if it's going to go to full council, then there will be an opportunity to add an amendment. Can I just make the point about once again requesting the CEO of South West Water to attend? At the last full council meeting, when this topic was discussed, within the resolution it says, and I quote, request the CEO of South West Water to attend a session of this council's overview and scrutiny committee to answer questions. So that's already been done. I'm not certain as to whether or not you're allowed a second bite of the cherry, but that's if that is going to be a recommendation put to full council, needs to be you need to bear in mind it's already been put. So I think some advice would need to be taken as to whether or not that should be included in this. I would suggest that it is not included, but in fact at the full council meeting, a check be made as to okay, the full council has already asked, what is the next step? Because clearly that request has been refused. So I think, as far as the meeting with the CEO, I think that's perhaps left to when it's dealt with at full council. Bearing in mind the request was already raised at the previous full council meeting. So I mean, I think perhaps it's a matter of, unless there's anything really important to be added to this, then there is an opportunity for all members to address that when it comes to full council.
Steve?
So, Councillor Birch, at the moment it is on the agenda for full council to bring back these recommendations. So therefore, council will have the opportunity to debate, add, amend these recommendations.
Is this a practice run?
No, not at all.
Councillor Dennis?
For me, the most important things in these recommendations are the first one is that detailed programme of work so that we can see it, we can understand, and then we can chase them up on those things. And the third one about enhancing their engagement. And I think I would like to see not only community action groups there, but parish councils and councillors. I think actually there has been a bit of progress on that one. I know Councillor Penfold has now got access to a sort of council inquiries general email address, and a commitment to that being monitored and responded to. But nevertheless, I think it would be important to add that into recommendation 3. And like I say, for me, the important ones are number 1 and number 3. Without the detailed programme in number 1 being delivered to us, I don't know what we would be asking them in number 2, other than different to what we asked them last time.
I agree, Councillor Dennis, and I think this committee should be reviewing that. It should be holding South West Water to account on number 1, because that's how we judge whether they are delivering what they said they were going to do, committing to their promises.
And also, just go back to Councillor Bonham's point, it is the local knowledge that we can provide to help with that detailed programme of work. You know, items 4 and 5 are lovely, but you know, actually, what's achievable from us is understanding, having that local knowledge of where culverts are overflowing, or where there's, you know, parish knowledge there, or where they're being cleaned, and that's what we can do and achieve, I think.
Steve?
So, in terms of moving this forward, then, shall we just go one at a time and vote on, are we happy with it? Do we, we need to put a date in there? A date, again, do you say 3 months, 6 months? I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember when they said they were going to get their plan signed off by Ofwat. So basically, they'd submitted their plan. Ofwat had come up with some suggestions. They were revising it, but I couldn't remember the date that was then going to become.
Ofwat was on the radio this day, and I think this is relevant and live.
Councillor Bonham?
Well, I thought we had an amendment proposed.
Yes, so we do.
Okay.
Where we're going to do the first one regarding the answers to the questions, review those.
Did you put that one in?
Earlier.
Did you want me to? Number 1.
Yeah, number 1 as to, was it to review the answers to the questions we asked? Obviously, because if not, they get lost.
When they answer them.
Yeah, when they answer them. Just to remind us.
So I've just written, I'll add it in.
Yeah,
the Chair to formally write to the Chief Executive of South West Water requesting response to the questions sent to them following the meeting on the 17th of October.
Yeah. Yeah. I propose that. Oh, second. Yeah. All those in favour?
Then there was the amendment from.
Yep, Councillor
Oram.
Actually, letter.
I was about to see. Okay.
Was that a separate one, or did you want?
Yeah, so make that number 1. Sorry.
It was included in section 12, sorry, number 2, wasn't it?
What was CEO?
The CEO bit was in number 2, wasn't it?
But this is a
It was
separate point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris asked if the CEO
could attend.
Yeah, and
So you wanted it as a separate point, didn't you? Yeah.
That's fine.
You're happy with that?
Yeah.
Go back to your question about the Ofwat review. I think they've already done it.
Yeah, I think it was today.
I was going to say, well, no, I'm looking at a report that's dated July 2024, overview of South West Water's PR24 draft determination. So,
No,
is that different? Probably.
Yeah, my understanding, and I may be incorrect here, is that they made some provisional decisions, and then that was to be reviewed again because the price rises were too high, and the water companies argued that they should review it again. And I believe it's happening in middle of December. I may be wrong on that, early to mid-December. So maybe the date needs to be mid-January or something.
Why don't we say end of January? Let's.
Yeah, whatever.
End of January.
End of January.
Yeah.
Propose. Seconder. All those in favour? Great. Councillor Steele had a point.
Well, it was just say on the Ofwat website, it says it plans to be subject to scrutiny before final decisions are made in December. So
January's perfect. Great. Now on to 3. There was a suggestion for an amendment there.
That was due by the CEO.
Yeah, Councillor On.
Councillor Birch saying let's bring that back to council, but he's not on the committee, so it's up to you whether you want that to.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on that point, we have every right to say, we would re-invite the CEO back on the basis that we still haven't seen it yet, and I don't think that is a contradiction to the previous motion that went to full council. But on that particular point, because I know some members are also have views about the CEO and whether she should still have a job, maybe that is something that needs to be left for the time being and go to full council, so that the whole council can have a say. And just to point out, Chairman, I don't wish to mislead anybody. The reason why I said, wanted this to come back here so we could discuss it is not to take the power away from full council to have their say. It was just when this says this is the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, at the time I said, but it's not a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, it's a recommendation from the top table. That's why I said I'd like it to be discussed so the committee can say this is our recommendations to full council. That's all. Yeah, just to put that on the record.
So I'm going to leave 3, or do you want to mention senior?
No, I'm happy to withdraw that amendment at this time, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Bonham?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've sort of slightly cross purposes, but I'm very happy with 3 as it is, and I'm prepared to move that because I think we're just saying we're going to be monitoring constantly their performance against the plan that they provide under 2.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's very sensible.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. On to 4. We've added parish councils. Thank you. Everyone happy with that? Great. 5 and 6. You've got to change recommendations 1 to 6 at the top as well. But we're going to see them. Maybe scrap them. Yeah.
Get on the screen so I can speak.
I mean, I'm not really very. I mean, the government already has an inquiry. It's not or sort of a review. It's not a public inquiry, so I don't particularly support 5. But I mean, obviously, other people may have different views. 6, 6A, I would agree. I think 6B probably needs some more discussion.
Councillor On?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in agreement with Councillor Bonham on this one. 6 in particular. I mean, if we were to look at, I mean, the National Liberal Democrats want to actually bin Ofwat altogether and replace it with an organisation that's got more teeth. But now we really are going into areas that are not really in our gift and not really in our domain. So, and that's for the big boys in Parliament to sort out, really. So, you know,
and girls.
Thank you for that, Chairman. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Indeed, stand corrected. For those in Parliament to sort out, so not really for us to comment on or to suggest that Parliament look at, or government in particular, look at a particular strategy for this. And as for number 5, Chairman, I mean, our MPs are already doing a great job at holding South West Water to account. And I speak for both MPs in our area, so both our Conservative and Lib Dem MPs are both doing a sterling job. So I don't think we really need to go over that again. So if it were me, Chairman, I would scrap 5 and 6 and just have recommendations 1 to 4 to go to full council. But that's just my view.
Well, so you're proposing that, Councillor Orr?
Thank you, Steve. Yes, can I propose that we scrap recommendations 5 and 6 and leave just recommendations 1 to 4 to go to full council?
I'm happy to second that. Keep it concise.
Vote on it?
Yeah, and vote. Pardon?
I said all those in favour, it's Bass's job.
On to item number 11, Task and Finish Group updates. An update from Task and Finish Group on hunting. I'll go to Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you. I was reluctantly appointed chair of this committee, of Task and Finish Group, but here we are. So I wasn't even there when they appointed me, which I don't think is quite fair, actually. But so yeah, we've had our first meeting, which was productive, actually, and we generated lots more questions, which we're hoping the answers to those will come back to us when we meet on the 12th of December. Appreciating Councillor Canahan's comments that it has taken a long time for the Task and Finish Group to not only form, but of course once we come up with a recommendation, that will have to go back to is it executive and then full council? No, it have to go back to ONS and then to full council. So we're not expecting sort of the results of that till February, March time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dennis. B, the Procurement Strategy Task and Finish Group. The first meeting will take place next week. Great, I think that's it. C, the Local Lettings Policy Task and Finish Group. So recommendations from the will go. Have we done that already then?
No, we haven't seen the recommendations yet, so they'll come back to us on the 5th of December before going back to the exec.
Perfect, thanks very much. And then there's a Fusion Task and Finish Group, and the meeting will take place on the 12th of December as well. Item number 12, Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, it's not one of those 4, but in the Audit and Governance meeting, we had a question raised about the Council's governance policy, in particular with regard to engagement with stakeholders and community groups. And community engagement, really thinking about how we socialise some of our decisions and get feedback and comments from other organisations before we make decisions. It was put to the committee that actually this is more a question for Overview and Scrutiny. So I discussed this with the chair of Overview and Scrutiny, and I think what we said was we would float the idea here in this meeting about whether to set up a joint Task and Finish group of both committees to look at that topic, set the terms of reference, and work on it together. Now, 2 of my colleagues are here. discussed it before. I think, I don't know, Steve, I don't think you're in that meeting. Amelia, you were in that meeting, weren't you, when it was, oh no, you were absent. Okay, well anyway, it was, yeah, well anyway, it was put to audit and governance, that it was kind of a joint responsibility, because it was part to do with overview and part to do with governance. So I'm not quite sure exactly what my proposal is in terms of this, but you know, maybe can we set up a joint task and finish group on a topic like that? How can that be moved forward?
So, in terms of task and finish groups, whether it's one committee or more than one committee doesn't really matter, because in reality you can have non-members from the committee on the task and finish group. So in theory, whether you call it an A and G, what I would say is you don't want it reporting back to both places. So there needs to be a decision: does it report back to this committee, or you can have members from anywhere on the task and finish group, so that's not an issue. But what I wouldn't want is the same report going to two committees, because that's just a bit pointless.
Might get two different answers.
And especially if you get two different answers and two different sets of recommendations. So from that perspective, you can have members from audit and governance on a task and finish group, or O&S on a task and finish group, but I wouldn't. It needs to be a role of one of the committees, is my view.
Well, okay, maybe the next step is to, now I've floated the idea, is to check with Democratic Services and bring it back, if this is the right place to bring it back to.
And we have a meeting on the 5th of December, which in a couple of weeks' time, where we could discuss it. No, sorry, when is it? 5th of December, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, just sorry, Chair. In terms of what's the views of the committee, do they think it would be, you know, something they would want to get involved in? That would be my question in the first instance.
Any thoughts, anybody? Councillor Owen?
I always get a slight twitch when we talk about getting another task and finish group in. I think that, you know, we're stretched quite thinly as it is at the moment. So if something like that were to come to council, I think it needs to be given its due process, but it's not something that I think we would entertain in the immediate future. Is my view, Chairman.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Councillor Owen. Could we add it to our list of things to consider, and once we complete some of the other tasks and finish group, maybe come back to you? Thank you. Anything else? Nope. Item number 12, the Executive Forward Plan. The Chair to ask members to note the Executive Forward Plan. Noted.
So,
noted. Lovely. Item 13, the O&S Annual Work Programme. Councillor Dennis?
Yeah, Councillor Birch has gone, but we are missing his thematic update, and I don't see why it couldn't happen in February.
Yes.
It could happen in February. The alternative, based on the discussion this morning in executive, where there was a question about climate change and biodiversity, as to whether we want to bump that forward to February and put Councillor Birch on economy in March, but it's for you guys to decide.
Councillor Dennis.
On the basis that only 4% of his action points in that thematic area have been achieved, as opposed to climate having achieved 28% of them, I think the more pressing one to look into would be the economy.
Any thoughts? Yeah, so can we ask him to come to February? Yep, I'm happy with that. Any other items to add? Oh. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, just tied up with that is one of our partner, I don't know what they're called, partner organisations is the Business Information Point. I understand. I don't know how much we fund them by. or contract them for, but it might be interesting to have them come and talk to us.
That's a request. We can add it to the list. We can see where we
Yeah,
can
would
give
that-
them the dates and see which meeting
Yeah.
they can come to.
Would it be good to get them in February as well? Or pardon? Yeah, it does tie into your economy. So maybe write to them and see if they can make the February meeting. Thank you.
Actually,
go on.
I mean, bearing in mind business information point is economy, it would make sense to have them in the same meeting, wouldn't it?
That's why I suggested it.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, Chair. It only just dawned on me. So.
Thank you very much. Anything else to add? No, all good? Perfect. The next meeting will take place on the 5th of December. There we are. Goodness. A whole 2 weeks.
You're going to close the meeting?
I am going to close the meeting now. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.